DPS kid through and through, and I just am very grateful that you've welcomed me into your space today. Um, I also want to do a little bit of acknowledgement in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. I acknowledge that we are gathered today in our homes on the ancestral land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho nations. This area is also the site of trade, hunting, gathering, and healing for many Native nations, the Ute, Lakota, Kiowa, Comanche, Apache, Shoshone, and the Sakowin Sioux, and many other Native nations. I also acknowledge that our country was built with stolen labor and the generational wealth, which was created by the hands and backs of enslaved people was kept from them while enriching others. So the title of my talk today and my message is To Be Seen, Identity Exploration and Empowering All Youth. So as we kind of get into this, this is a really trying time for young people. The the pandemic obviously has taken a major toll on a lot of the things that they thought their school year would be, and it's the type of uncertainty has been really tough. Spending hours upon hours on screens has been extremely challenging for our young people, and we continue to see young people fall victims to violence. Want to also acknowledge recently Dante Wright and Adam Toledo, and the very tense situation that is emerging in the Derek Chauvin trial, and just understanding that we are all carrying a tremendous load right now. I want to take you to 7th grade. There is your state teacher of the year, circa 1987. And so this is kind of funny. Those of us of a certain age, maybe if we have teenagers, we have been acknowledged for like our style. And I know that we weren't talking about our parents' style when we were teenagers, but I have students saying, Mister, why don't you do your hair like that anymore? Why don't you wear those shirts anymore? So I just want to point out the drip real quick. I was badly in need of a haircut. I never got haircuts when I needed them. And that's actually a real issue in my adult life. I've got my Coca-Cola rugby shirt, if people remember those. Got my chain, got my collar popped. I was feeling pretty good about myself in 7th grade. 7th grade me really did need to be seen. I have some moments, and one of the really amazing things, I think every Colorado teacher, all 40,000 of us in the state of Colorado, should get to be teacher of the year, because it really does force you to ask questions of yourself. Who am I? How did I get like this? What is it that guides me? And I've heard it said before, and I forget who the quote is attributed to, that teachers should strive to be the teacher that they needed when they were younger. And I think that that's shaped a lot of my path. But I think as I've reflected on my career, which has now entered its 3rd decade, I also realize that I'm striving to be the teacher that my community needed. I grew up in East Denver in the Five Points neighborhood, and it was a place that was beautifully complex. On the one hand, there was a long history of migration into the area. The Great Migration brought a lot of the prominent Black families into the city of Denver. People don't realize the type of Black history that Denver has. And I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital and was able to grow up within that heritage and within that history. It was a community that embraced me when there weren't a lot of kids like me around. And two things can be true. On the one hand, there was a period when the Five Points neighborhood was referred to as Harlem of the West. And on the other hand, the formative years of my life, middle school and high school in particular, our community was plagued by violence. And that is sort of something I've reflected a lot on, the violence that was around me when I grew up, as we think about more victims falling to gun violence in 2021. These are things that I remember clearly how they felt and what it was like. But 7th grade me really needed to be seen. So I'm going to share a couple of stories with you. One that is not the best version of myself, and one that I think was a turning point in my in my own growth, in my own education, in my own development as a young person. If you would have told this little brown kid from the east side with too much hair, my nickname was Mowgli, by the way, those of y'all who are familiar with the Jungle Book, for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. If you had told this boy, this 11, 12-year-old boy, that he would one day become state teacher of the year, he probably would have laughed at you because A, he didn't like teachers, B, he didn't like school, C, he didn't feel seen. He didn't feel like a person that could stand out like that. And there's still a part of me that's incredibly humbled by the Department of Education, by the Colorado PTA, by the Colorado Education Association for selecting me to be this representative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about seventh grade. The beginning of seventh grade, I was taking woodshop class. My woodshop teacher, no joke, was named Mr. Carpenter. You can't make this up. And you could say he was kind of born for this. So Mr. Carpenter would talk to us about woodshop safety. This is the thing that freaks us all out in classrooms. It's like, okay, we got these really great things we're going to do. How do we make sure that children do not maim themselves or each other as we do this? So he's teaching us how to use a sander. And so, these table sanders that have the wheel that spins, he was very clear saying to us, okay, so when you do this, do not put it towards the back of the wheel. You have to put it towards the front. If you put the wood at the back of the wheel, it's just going to launch that wood across the room. And I was like, really? That sounds fun. And so myself, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but my boys, Eric and Lamont and Mark, we all just started having fun, like shooting these pieces of wood across the room. And we got in trouble, as we should have. Getting people to laugh was something that I really enjoyed, and finding things to occupy my idle hands. If you told me something was a bad idea, there was a non-zero chance that I was going to pursue that idea. I was hiding a lot, and I think this has really formed my path as a teacher. I was a struggling reader as a high school student. I didn't like to, but my biggest issue that I had was that I stuttered. And my stutter became an issue when I was about 10 years old. It would get to the point where I would feel frozen. So I would be asked to speak, and I would freeze. The muscles in my jaw would tighten. I could feel the veins in my neck popping, and I would just freeze. And the harder I tried to speak, the harder it became. I had a lot of ways to try to survive that. Some of it was acting silly and getting attention other ways. And then I began to mumble. I would mumble a lot because at least if I made a mistake, nobody could hear it. And so a teacher would ask me a question. What's the capital of the United States? My response would be Washington, D.C. And then I would be admonished to speak up, and then I would start acting out. So that was something that was really hard. Answering questions off the top of my head, just being cold called, was a really loaded situation. Read aloud was really tough because if I had to read something aloud, I would still struggle over it and the kids would laugh. And it was extremely tough. So second semester of seventh grade, I was put in drama class. And I was like, this is not something that's happening. Like me on stage talking in front of people on purpose. This is not something I'm going to do. Nope. And I contrived to get myself thrown out of class for about the first 3 or 4 days that we were there because this was just something that absolutely terrified me. And I believe it was on the Thursday or Friday that week, Miss Fuller, shout out to Miss Fuller. She has, as I've reflected on this process, she's really given me such perspective on myself as a middle schooler. And those of you who have middle schoolers know how hard it is for middle school kids to figure it out and how scary that time is. She took me aside and she's like, I know what you're trying to do. I'm going to stop putting you out of class. You need to be here. This is good for everybody. And, I didn't really believe it. And then the following week she says, okay, everybody. So I want everybody to prepare. We're all going to memorize a poem and we're going to recite it at an assembly for Black History Month. And I was like, okay, this is too far. I cannot do this. But she was persistent. She made it very clear that you will be reciting this poem. And the poem that I recited at the top is the poem that we recited as a class. And it opened so many doors for me as I found poetry, and then later as I found hip hop music, I would listen to these rappers. And obviously, my parents didn't love that I was listening to this music, but to hear these men and women speak so assertively and so comfortably and so powerfully, I was like, man, how can I be like Big Daddy Kane? How can I be like Rakim? How can I be like these street poets who just say what they want and they feel confident doing it? Now, obviously my 13-year-old perspective on hip hop music had some maturing to do, and I've educated myself around a lot of things. But I'm so grateful for a teacher that saw me and knew that I had something to offer, even though she barely knew me. She saw all of us as having gifts, and that has really shaped my path. Um, so just some little shots. That's my yearbook from eighth grade. My friend Eric. Well, duty, I guess I better write some more because well, anyway, this year has been too cool and probably would have stunked if me and you had never met. Since you're going to Sorry Manual, we'll have to meet during the summer. Um, it's great stuff, and the yearbook is full of stuff like that. I also want to point out, so this is the Cole yearbook. 89-90. That was my eighth grade year. I want to point out here that and I didn't remember doing this until I looked at the book. If you look here, my picture's been cut out. And when I thought back on it, I cut out my own picture. I couldn't bear what I looked like. I didn't like my appearance. I didn't like myself. I did not want to be seen, even though I knew I needed it. And that is something that really sticks in my mind today. How many kids today would just as soon cut themselves out of their own yearbooks? I try to carry that with me every day. So as we kind of go into this really difficult moment, and I was able to join the conversation as the workshop was ending. So much apprehension, so much anxiety about what transitioning back into school in person means. Will we be able to do it? To what extent will we be able to do it? Will we be able to keep it? What about vaccines? What about these different things? And to say nothing about the mental health supports that our young people will need, 100% of them. And so I want to really promote this idea of ensuring that more than ever that our young people are seen. When I was in graduate school, I studied the work of Nell Noddings. Nell Noddings tells us a sense of responsibility in teaching pushes us constantly to think about and promote the best interests of our students. And that's not ever just one thing. There are moments when students need very strong academic support. There are times when students and communities need to be held accountable. There are times when we just need to see them and care. And Dr. Noddings emphasizes to us how important it is that if we must only choose one approach with our student, it should be approach of caring, a curriculum that emphasizes caring and seeing and building community. When I started teaching, I was teaching at a school that was an alternative school. And I'll just kind of point out really quickly that this alternative school was students who had really, really struggled to stay engaged and to stay connected to school. That's why they came to us. They came to us to make up credits that they had lost. These young people taught me so much. And the most important part of ensuring my students are seen is to listen to them and to hear their stories and to hear how they make sense of their existences and identities, and let them engage my teaching from the position that they're in. 100% of the young people I've ever met have wanted to succeed. And 100% of those young people are exactly the humans that they need to be. This doesn't mean they know how to do everything. It doesn't mean they have the skills. It doesn't mean that they make the best choices from the position of who they are. It doesn't mean that their grades are always great. But I think we need to get to a point where we're emphasizing that our care and respect for our children has nothing to do with their achievements. We love and care for them and respect them because they are human beings who are doing the best that they can. And we just have to figure out, what can we do to help? And what can we do to amplify their voices? I am an optimist in these hard times. And optimism is not a character trait. It's not a personality trait. It's a practice. It's a discipline. What am I going to do to stay optimistic today? And the last 13 months, trying to make sense of my own identity as a teacher is a big irony of me being the 2021 Colorado Teacher of the Year, because this is probably the year that I feel the least confident about my teaching. It's hard. I don't know how to answer the questions that come up from other teachers. I don't know how to address a student who has their Google Meet on, but they are not, their camera is off, their mic is off. There's no evidence that they're engaging. I don't know how to do that. I feel like a first year teacher again. And, this is the time when I passed 20, I was kind of like, Psh, I got this. This is going to be easy from now on. Well, now I'm realizing that it's not. So I'm not optimistic because I have all the answers. I'm not optimistic because I trust that every safeguard is in place to protect our students and our communities. I'm an optimist because of what I am willing to do to listen to and amplify and value my young people. One of the things that has been a real powerful thing for me at the Denver Center for International Studies at Baker, right there downtown, is what we do around student voice and leadership. We've realized that we will not find the way forward if we don't bring every voice in our community together. And I want to shout out my amazing principal, Marisa Vasquez, who has first principal job and who is really trying to bring as many voices to the table as we can get there. I've been honored to teach a class that is both policymaking, community organizing, and leadership, called Challenge 5280. And this is where young people identify challenges within their schools and communities, and they work to address those challenges. My little crew right here, my team from last year, was able to create a mechanism for students to have ongoing feedback to give to governing bodies in our community. And the thing is that I think if I have been successful as a teacher, it has been because I let my students teach me. I let myself learn from them and adjust to what I'm doing. I used to think that the apex sort of pedagogical arrival of a teacher was to have that file cabinet with all of the assignments for every single day of the year. You just take them out, white out the date, put a new date on, and you just go through the motions. What I've realized now is that every class is different, because every group is different, because every child is different. And it is my job to create points of entry to what I'm teaching. I'm going to wrap up with a couple of things around my message for this year. What I'll be working on over the course of the year is, how do we create communities that are student-centered and teacher-powered? How do we have these communities that are alive and vibrant and enthusiastic and constantly learning from each other? For me, it is about finding ways for students to be seen. And there are ways to do that just through caring. I also really believe strongly that 100% of students want to learn about themselves, but they also want to learn about the world around them. And that's why it's been such a blessing to work at a school for international studies within the International Studies Schools Network, because we intentionally try to expose children to the rest of the world, to the cultures and the ways of being and the ways of thinking and the ways of seeing and expression that we can do. We do that through language. We do that through cultural studies classes, and trying to give as many windows as we can. I believe that all children should have access to ethnic studies coursework, because it changed me, and it would have been great for the people that I knew. By the time I started learning about my history as a part European, part Latinx person, I was resentful. I was like, why did I never get to learn this history before? And so I would love for folks to have those opportunities, because learning about the rest of the world completed me. I'm gonna close with a quote from the amazing author Arundhati Roy, who wrote both The God of Small Things and An Ordinary Person's Guide to Empire. She says, there is no such thing as the silent, only the silenced or the preferably ignored. And that's something that I carry with me all day, every day, doing the best that I can. And every day is not perfect, but every day is an opportunity. I want to thank the Colorado PTA for inviting me to participate today. I'm humbled in your presence, and I'm just very grateful for this platform. Not totally sure what comes next.
Yay, thank you so much, Gerardo. We feel so honored to have had you join us today. Your message is right in line with the discussion we had yesterday, we've been having, and will continue to have. Our mission is to engage and empower all families and communities, and we're really focused on making that mission possible.
Amazing.
So, we appreciate you making that real for us, and we know why your students and your families love you so much.
And I'll invite folks, if you want to follow the work that I'm doing as Colorado Teacher of the Year, you can go to CTOY on Twitter. I also host and produce a podcast called Two Dope Teachers. At Two Dope Teachers, you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter as well. So definitely reach out if there's anything I can do to support your work wherever you are.
Great, thank you. And that's Two Dope, TOO, right?
I'll put it in the chat.
Good, thank you.